rolling, right? So we should just start talking?
You're
Or stop talking and start talking?
So yeah, go for
Oh,
it.
really? Okay.
Well, we did all meet around Danger.
Danger was a company that was started in late 1999, before there was any cellular data. It was a startup company, venture funded, and Rich was one of the investors. And the first customer was T-Mobile US. At that point, it was VoiceStream, and Nick was the product guy at VoiceStream.
Yeah, I met Andy at CES in 2001, I believe. Our job was to go out and find alternative devices that would bring data to life. And I sit down with Andy, and he's got basically, he doesn't even have a form factor. He's just got a board on a piece of wood, mounted on a piece of wood, and he's got a picture. And it was such an interesting device. I hadn't seen anything like this yet. And I remember telling him, well, you're either a genius or you're blowing smoke up my ass, and we're gonna find out which one it is.
And then, Danger ran its natural course, and I rolled off and started thinking about what my next startup would be. So I got a little office in Palo Alto, and then started assembling a team. One of the first people I called was a gentleman named Chris White. So he was a user interface designer, but more than a user interface designer, he was like a product designer. And Chris and I spent a lot of nights just dreaming of what this company that we were forming would be. I had a domain name, Android.com, literally lying around. And so we kind of built the company around that domain name and called it Android. We started exploring what it would be like to take a digital camera and build an operating system for it.
In October of 2004, I call Andy. I said, well, I don't know diddly about cameras. If you change your mind and you end up doing phones, call me back. And the phone rang a month later, and Andy said, I think we're going to turn our business, our first market towards phones.
In between there is when I sort of came into the picture. I had been at Orange with the VC hat on and an operational hat on. I had just launched with my operational hat on, helped launch the first Windows mobile phone. I think that's when the three of us started talking and said, how do you make a business out of this? How do we prototype something to bring to Mobile World Congress to show some handset manufacturers?
Literally in the span of 1 month, it all just came together, and all four of us were working on an open source platform that would be carrier friendly and still be able to go across all manufacturers.
It was fun. It was fun having these strategy discussions, and it was like we were finishing each other's sentences.
And then something really big happened. Right after we started our combined version of what Android became in December, there was a phone call that Andy got from Larry Page. And they really wanted to just talk about creating a phone that would be a great experience. And they just kept it very casual.
And those discussions progressed. And I think the acquisition closed in July of 2005.
Yes.
July 11th.
You guys are much better than I am with your dates.
Well, my daughter was born a few days later, July 16th.
All of a sudden, we found ourselves, 8 of us, being Google employees.
Apple hadn't even started its iPhone project. There just weren't smartphones, right? There was maybe the Sony Ericsson had the P900, which was the closest thing to a smartphone. So there wasn't even a smartphone category. And in Google, we were considered this wacky...
We were a skunkworks project.
Building this thing sort of just off in a separate building, starting to build Android.
And at that moment, Synaptics and some of the other companies were building capacitive touchscreens. And that was an enabler for a completely fluid user experience. We were working on 2 devices at the time, and we knew one of the devices, our holy grail device, was going to have a Synaptics capacitive touchscreen.
That was our dream phone, called Dream. And then we had another phone which looked more classically like a BlackBerry, had a physical keyboard and a smaller screen above the keyboard, and we called that one Sooner, because the idea was, well, we can go to market sooner.
I think when we made the go, no-go decision on which one of these 2 devices to launch, we were obviously influenced by what the competitors were doing, and the iPhone launched. So at that point, we're like, we could have done Sooner, but let's double down on Dream because it looks like the specs are more comparable to what just launched by Apple. The rest of the industry was trying to figure out what to do. And a lot of the industry turned to us, turned to Google. the combination of Google services in a mobile environment with this modern operating system with a capacitive touchscreen made sense to everybody as the quickest path to formulate an answer.
Open source was the proof to the carriers that they could, if they didn't like how things ended up, take their own ball and go home because we wouldn't control it.
Apple did us a huge favor. Because they did these deals with carriers in every country, basically, as the iPhone started to become successful, the other carriers realized, oh my God, we need something that looks flagship-like that's going to compete with the iPhone. And that's what brought Verizon to the table. That Motorola Droid device that Verizon launched, and more importantly, the $100 million ad campaign that they committed to with that launch, sort of put Android on the map.
I wasn't expecting apps to become so important to the success of smartphones. With the SDK, and then Apple has the App Store, the iTunes, they add apps. When we launched Android Market,
100.
we had 100, and then it went to 10,000, and then it went to 100,000, and then it went to 1 billion. It followed the installed user base, and Nokia finally ends up bringing a touchscreen device to market. Microsoft brings a touchscreen to market. They actually have good products, but it's too late. The game is over. It's over because they don't have a development community. They don't have millions and millions of subscribers who are demanding apps. So it ended up, the App Store ended up being the competitive barrier to entry, and it knocks out Nokia and Microsoft in one fell swoop, and the only players that were able to keep in that race was the Android platform.
The benefit of all this openness is that freedom to innovate. And innovation happens all around you. And wouldn't it be a great thing if you could harvest all the innovation and put it in an app store or put it in an ecosystem? And that's what happened with Android.